Hello, beloved Smith family members. My name's Nathan Kimball Hall. Like you, I'm privileged to call myself a grandson of Jesse Nathaniel Smith, a truly great man, a pioneer, one who loved God, loved his family. I'm here at his memorial home in Snowflake, Arizona, a special place. I wanted to introduce you to a passion project of mine. I have, for some time, wanted to hear from Jesse N's remaining grandchildren. Here's a man who was born at the tail end of 1834 and still has living grandchildren. There are 9 living grandchildren left, and you'll be introduced to them in a minute. But I was so grateful in this experience for how it's enriched my life, and being able to meet them and being able to visit with them and hearing their tremendous stories. These are family members of ours who were born in a different era. They've seen changes. We have some cousins who are actual grandchildren of Jesse N who are almost 100 years old. They're truly special people. And I'm so grateful that you and I get a chance to hear a small portion of their story. I wish we could hear so much more, but for time's sake, we had to share this amount that we have. But this is a blessed amount. And I hope that you will feel the way that I did, in feeling more edified, and feeling that much closer to Jesse N Smith, and feeling closer to our family members. Of the 44 children that Jesse N Smith had with his wives, think of that, 44 children at that time that he lived. Of those 44 children, 42 lived to maturity, 40 got married, and 38 had children. This is a tremendous posterity that Jesse N and his wives have. Because of this line, we also have the privilege of being tied to Joseph Smith Jr., the prophet, to Hiram Smith, to Joseph Sr., to Lucy, and to others. I hope that you appreciate this project as you view it, as I have. This is something that I'll remember the rest of my life, and I hope that you do too. And so now, dear Smith cousins, I'm happy to present the 9 living grandchildren of Jesse N Smith as they share their testimonies.
As you know, my name is Granda Jesse Smith Shumway Farr. I'm the only living granddaughter of Jesse N Smith and Jeanette Moretta Johnson. I was married to Lee Shumway for 54 years, and then I later married Lamar Farr, and we were called on a mission to Salt Lake City, to the Joseph Smith building, where we did a lot of genealogy. And it was a wonderful time in our lives.
I'm Janet, and this is Terry. This is our mother. Mom and I were named after Grandma Jeanette. So we'd like to tell you just a little bit about our mother. Granda Jesse Smith was born in 1934 and just turned 89. She was exactly 100 years younger than her grandpa, Jesse N Smith. Grandma Jeanette died the year before Mom was born. Since she didn't know either of them personally, we'd like to share with you some of her qualities that she has acquired from these special people and their legacy. Her father, Elias's pet names for her were Persnickety and Chatterbox, as she talked a lot. He said little girls were meant to be seen and not heard. She loved riding her horse Trixie and rounding up cows. Her dad called her his best cowboy. A few early memories of Mom's include having a good feeling when she was baptized in the Shallow Creek, being taught in a one-room schoolhouse with a big pot-bellied stove, coal oil lamps, hauling all their water, no indoor plumbing and electricity until she was in high school. Life on the farm was very hard. They worked hard all week and then every Saturday took baths in a number 3 tin tub and then loved riding in the back of the truck to Snowflake to the movies. Those growing up experiences certainly made her appreciate life with modern conveniences. This is from Mom's own words in her journal. It was here in Linden that I grew to maturity along with 8 wonderful brothers and sisters. It was here we learned the lessons of life so valuable to us now. Here we learned the hardships, but more important, the joys of being raised in a large family on a dry farm ranch. Daddy and Mother worked side by side with us. I owe much of my life's accomplishments to my hard-working days on the ranch. Some of the things she's done in her life to carry on her great legacy are marrying our dad, Lee Shumway, and she used to get up at 4 a.m. to do family history at the Family History Center in Snowflake. Then she would go to work in the Taylor Post Office where she worked for 27 years. She continued her love of family history in Mesa where she was a temple worker and Dad was a faithful patron. She made nice books for hers and Dad's families as well as ours. And they're filled with ancestor stories, family pictures, and also genealogy. A lot of time and money went into these books, which we hold very dear. Today, Mom is sitting in a chair that is nearly 100 years old. It belonged to her father, Elias. She loves to sit in it every day. Another special treasure Mom has in her home is this two pieces of the tea set that was brought from Scotland. We think by Grandma Jeanette's mother and then across the plains. And it was handed down to Mom and is truly a treasure. Mom's patriarchal blessing says in the first paragraph, "You are greatly blessed in being born of a faithful line of ancestry, of fathers and mothers and grandparents who have been faithful and kept the commandments of the Lord. Your blessing is great in belonging to this line of ancestry." And then this is the part that we love. "For their lives will be reflected in your life and character."
So Mom has asked that I read her testimony to end with. What an honor it is to belong to this faithful line of ancestry. I'm so grateful for them. Their example has given me strength to do really hard things. I have a strong testimony of our Savior and the love that He has for us. I know that our loved ones are close by when we need them. I'm grateful for the opportunity to express my appreciation for my ancestors' great example. I send my love to you all and wish I could be there with you.
We're so proud of our mother and are grateful for the heritage of faith and hard work that has been passed down from Grandpa Jesse and Grandma Jeanette.
It's May 1st, 2023. My name is Russell Ashcroft. I'm here with my mother, Lamel Farr Ashcroft, and we're going to work our way through a few of the questions that have been asked her to respond to regarding her family and her grandfather. So the first question here is, what does it mean to you, Mom, being one of the last living grandchildren of Jesse N Smith?
I feel pretty honored. I don't like to be the oldest, but if that's the case, it's wonderful. My grandfather was a pretty nice man. I of course, didn't ever meet him because he died when my mother was a child. But we'd heard many stories about his faithfulness and his love of our Heavenly Father. It was nice just to hear some of the stories that we did hear, even though my grandmother died when I think I was just 5. We went over to show Grandma the newest grandbaby that was named for her, my little brother Augustus.
Uncle Gus.
Uncle Gus. And she died not long after that, and I was just 5. I was able to sit on my grandma's lap and feel the comfort of her love. It was very special.
Do you remember how old she was at that time? How old was she when she died?
Chimney Christmas. I don't know. I don't really.
But was she moving around pretty well at that time when you went
she
to
was
see her?
able to take care of herself pretty much. She lived in the old home that Grandpa built for her. He had a home for each one of his wives. There were 4 alive at the same time. And each one had a beautiful home there in Snowflake.
Wow. After all of those 44 children.
Yep.
How old, do you remember how old your mom was? How old Natalian was when her mom died? Actually, let me ask you, how old was she when her dad died? Do you remember?
No, I don't know those figures. I've never really looked or tried to find the age that she was.
Yeah, we could go back and look, but
Yeah. I couldn't tell you.
one of the
My mother had just had her. Oh, she had a set of twins after Gus,
yes,
and he was just a newborn baby when she died. Gus was.
when Grandma Outson died.
Yes, when Grandma Outson died.
Grandma Augusta Maria. Do you remember? I know you know this, but share how it was that your mom, Natalia, got her name.
No,
Do you remember why they named her that?
I don't remember any story about that. Any was told. I can't remember it. That's terrible.
I remember as a boy, as a family, and even as a extended family, we would have Christmas parties that we called them granny parties.
Mm-hmm.
And because her name was Natalia, she loved Christmas so much. And I was thinking that Natalia may have been a Danish name that came over, or was influenced.
It was definitely Danish.
But she did live up to her name because she loved Christmas so much and loved to celebrate.
Always, even after my dad died, I remember how Christmas would come out. And man, she'd put out every effort under the sun to make it just perfect. Even though we didn't have the money to do a lot of stuff, I guess she saved some up to that time. So that made Christmas very, very special.
She put a lot of effort into making it nice for the family.
Yes. We always had a nice Christmas.
Do you remember what was different in your family in Christmas observances before your dad died and after your dad died?
Oh, just the joy of having a dad that and appreciated all of us kids singing Christmas songs and just having him there, and I don't know, just the tender feelings that it always was while he was there. Just any time he was home, it seemed that way, but especially Christmas time.
I know that it was hard on Natalia after your dad died throughout her life. Do you feel like maybe Christmas was her way to kind of reminisce with her children
I'm sure.
that time to try and reminisce about him.
Bless her heart. She lived 40 years after my dad died. So
By herself.
That's the hard thing, taking care of us. She had chances of remarrying, and there was never anyone that would please her, even come anywhere near my dad. And she just managed. That was the way. That was her way. She did a pretty good job, I think, taking care of us and seeing that our needs were. Sometimes they weren't very great, but they were enough to keep us.
To keep you going.
And keep us happy over the situation we were under.
Do you remember any stories that your mom told you about either Jessie N or about her mother, Augusta?
No, except just the tender feelings. She said Grandpa would come and spend a week at a time with each of the wives, the 4 wives. So every month,
they'd have him for a month.
Grandpa was with Grandma for a week at a time. And, they're just sweet people, just tender. And Grandma living so long after she came to America and getting along with the language and everything. The tender feelings she had towards Grandpa always, I guess, was something that she always appreciated, thought about.
Seems to me, and I've read so many stories, that there was never any contention between the different wives within the family about Jessie.
Never. Mother said everything just ran as smooth, that if there was ever any contention between Grandpa and any of the wives, it was never known. She said everything was always just perfect. That there was no disagreements. Everything ran smoothly. They loved each other.
Yeah.
Like they were a very own sister to each other.
That's an amazing. That says a lot about who those people were. That they were able to make that work and be as agreeable as they were with each other.
And he was pretty busy as a stake president. He had quite a bit of traveling to do around the area that he was stake president over, and the families just seemed to take it and do what they could when he wasn't there. Everything ran smoothly. They all had having so much love of Grandpa.
Are there any other special remembrances about your mom and dad, specifically about growing up and maybe when your dad was alive or anything? What was your family life like when growing up?
Dad knew somehow through his life and got quite an acquaintance with the Indians on the reservation in New Mexico from us, and he loved those people. And what else? I mean, my mind slipped.
Seems like he was remembered and well revered by the Hispanic community there in St. John's as well.
Very much. He got along well with them. If there was any problem, he'd go to them and iron it out. He had a good relationship with the Mexicans there in town.
Seems like he was a very talented horseman.
He loved, and on the 24th of June, his birthday, they always had a rodeo. Mother said I could never plan a party for Dad because he was always at the rodeo, and they loved him for that because he was under control of the whole works for the rodeo.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he loved that. He loved horses, and I guess he did a lot of rodeo and jumping and bucking and all sorts of things with horses that he had.
Did I just had a thought to remember to ask you the living conditions that Natalia and David lived in right after they got married. That they lived in Hunt for a while.
They lived in Hunt for quite a few months. I think I'm not sure if they lived past the time Genevieve was born, but I know they were in Hunt with Genevieve. Norman was born, but they always went to Snowflake when Moon was ready to have a baby. They always went back to Grandma's house to have the baby.
To Snowflake.
To Norman and Genevieve. Then they were in Eager when Dean was born.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I don't remember what they went to Eager for, but they were there for a short time, and that's where they were when Dean was born.
Because they were just living in a tent out there in Hunt, weren't they?
Once in a while, they got a house that I think just was right there by what was the store and the post office. So they lived there because they were attending the post office.
Okay.
And but they seemed so happy. They loved it until Dad just gave up when he could see that there wasn't enough moisture to grow anything. They raised cattle as well as having harvest of the food for the cattle. And seemed like the stories I've read, and just recently, I can't remember just where I've read it, of the joy they felt in their home there in Holbrook, and not enjoying it when Dad finally says, "Oh, I guess we just got to move to St. John's," and that's when they came up. Probably, just maybe, I don't know. It was sometime after Dean was a baby. I think I remember some pictures somewhere of Norman and Genevieve. Of course, Genevieve was just 18 months and 19 months old when she died.
Yeah.
But always the happy. Anything I've run across of their life in Hunt was always great. And they could always take off and go to Snowflake, where Grandma would
go visit family.
Open arms and feel comfortable with him.
When they moved to St. John's, did they always live in that same house that you were a little girl in?
They moved to St. John's in this little house. It was only a 2-room house that I knew of, and I don't know just where all us kids lived, because we were, let's see, I took, Lamar and I carried Sylvia over to that house because there was that many of us alive and living in that home, so we must have had some tent or something outside.
That you were sleeping in or something?
That the older boys were in.
Okay.
And it was just a front room and there had to be a kitchen in that house. But I know that something was arranged for them a little bit bigger, and then Grandma Farr realized that the house they had built, adobe home over on the corner for big 4-room, and they even put the bathroom in, but it never did get in until after Dad was killed.
Oh.
Finally got a bathroom.
But you had moved into the house before he
yes.
died.
Grandma just said there's just not enough room in that little house. You've got to move. So she traded, and they made very nice for her, put in a bathroom and a kitchen and everything for her in that home. But she gave up her big 4-room house, adobe house for us, and it seemed sufficient. Of course, there was a garage there, and it seemed like that's where the boys kind of had their bedroom. But it was nice when they had a wooden floor and
had some space, and
yes,
not being in a tent.
And that's where Mom always she was a bottler, hundreds of quarts of food, mostly fruit. Those boys would go out there, take their friends with them, sit on their beds and eat bottled peaches. And Mom would go out and find all these empty bottles, and
That they'd eaten.
She says sometimes she'd have to go out there to find enough spoons to set the table because they take the spoons from the house. Take the spoons from the house to the garage to eat the peaches.
Probably didn't make her very happy. They were eating all the fruit she'd canned.
Well, I guess she enjoyed it. She appreciated it. And they were always bringing friends. I remember my oldest brother bringing a friend that was same age. They'd go out there, even when I was a pretty good-sized kid. They were still
That was where all the friends went.
Yeah, to go out there and eat Mom's good peaches,
That's
bottle
funny.
peaches.
Where did she get those? Did they grow them in St. John's?
No, there's a guy that would drive from somewhere in Utah, would bring us down and take him a week or two. He'd come with a whole pickup loaded with peaches, and we could get a bushel of peaches for $1.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, think of it now.
Yeah.
Yes. And Mom would buy 3 or 4 bushel of peaches and put them
Just
out.
can them and
She kept her bottles from year to year. And I remember just the whole attic of that garage was filled with peach with not only peaches but other fruit
the canned foods.
that they canned that we'd get from the.
Is that where you learned how to do all the canning from your mom?
I was there to wash the bottles and get them ready. One night I remember peeling a lot of peaches. Anyway, that was a good. What should I say?
Good skill to learn.
It was, yes, a good skill for me to learn. I didn't ever feel bad about what I had to do. Whatever it was assigned my part, that was what I appreciated doing for my mom. And I used to go to the neighbors and help them too, or tend their kids while they did something.
Mm-hmm. You spent a lot of time babysitting, both for your own family
I did
and
a lot. In fact, quite a bit of my clothing is a young 11, 12, 13, 14. I was a good babysitter for my cousin next door. She had 2 little girls, and her husband was a school teacher. Anyway, they needed a babysitter a lot, so I was handy to do that. And she made a lot of my clothes for me, which was also helpful.
in payment to you for watching kids.
For what I did.
That's a pretty good trade.
Yeah, it's very nice for me. I wouldn't have much of anything to wear otherwise. Mom just didn't have that. She made a lot of our clothes too, which was nice. She'd find a bowl of material, bring it home, and Sylvia and I'd have clothes made alike.
What do you attribute your secret to living to be 96 years old?
A sweet husband. And some fine kids that always seemed to go along with the plans that were made or the rules that were put up for us to follow. Had some good kids. Yeah.
I think both you and Dad, growing up in the time that you did, where your families had to produce and you lived off what you grew, you lived
not
off what
very
you
much.
provided for yourselves, and so it was all pretty pure food that you were eating.
Also, when we were married, it was just part of our life to have a good garden, to make the food that we ate and the food that I canned a good share of. Except the fruit. We lived in whether we had, seems like we had an apple tree or 2 that worked for us very good on our own property, but other than that, seems like the peaches would freeze in the spring, and so we never did.
Could never get
them. We always bought good ones that came from Utah. The same peddler came year after year.
Keep bringing them to you.
Bringing them down.
Let's see. Couple more, Mom. Did you ever hear any stories from your mom about when Jesse N went on his mission and married Augusta while he was on a mission. Did she share anything about that or talk about any experiences that
No,
Augusta shared with her?
no, I don't remember ever hearing anything like that. My mom was always so proud of her dad and what he had done, going on a mission twice to Denmark, and of course finding her mother and bringing her back here to America. That was always a wonderful story.
She seemed like she was a very pleasant, happy person.
She was. I admire my mom because of that, because having 9 children from 3 to 20, 21, I think Norman was almost 21, and not having a husband that could help support her. I think she did wonderfully
It
well.
was amazing. Wasn't stature-wise, Natalia was much bigger than Augusta, wasn't she?
I think she was probably a little taller.
Yeah.
Mom was quite a
That's
tall
I meant
lady.
taller.
Yes.
Augusta Maria was kind of a shorter, smaller.
Yes.
And I
As
think
I
Jesse N
re-
was not. I mean, I don't think he was very tall, was he?
Well, I'm not sure. I think he probably wasn't 6 foot, but he was a big man.
She must have got her stature from the Smith side.
Maybe. Anyway, Grandma Smith wasn't a very big lady when I knew her. Always big enough to hold me on her lap, though, and that was always so pleasing.
Did she like to have babies around and hold
yes.
babies? And
Oh, yes. When she'd hold me and squeeze me and rock me. She had a big rocking chair she always held her grandbabies in and rocked them, and that was a precious feeling. It was wonderful.
So then after Gus, she must have died before Aunt Sibby was born and the twins, Earl and Merle, right?
Gus, the twins, they were younger. Sylvia was a little older than Gus.
Was Sibby just younger than you and Uncle Bud?
Yeah, she was the next child.
I thought it was you, then Gus, then Sibby.
No, Sibby and then Gus.
Okay. Any other memories or thoughts that you want to share that you can think of?
Can't think of, except it was special, belonged to that big family. Always enjoyed going to Snowflake and meeting cousins. I remember, just a sideline, we lived across the street from Dad's uncle, and his wife was very sensitive to noise. And when all the grandkids would get to Granny's house and we'd make all this noise, he'd often have to come out and tell us, be a little quieter, my wife has a headache. But he was always so gentle and sweet. Of course, he was a stake president over there, too. But later became uncle of my husband.
He was. Wait, say that again.
He was Grandma Rachel's brother.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
So he was the uncle to Dad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's kind of funny. That
He'd
go to Snowflake and get scolded for making noise at Grandma's house.
Well, it was right straight across the street. He was a good neighbor, and it was always nice to see he and his wife go off, walk to church. Of course, we were just a block and a half from the church house.
Mm-hmm.
It was nice to see those folks. And then find out became relatives later in life.
Funny how that works out, huh?
Yes.
It's my privilege to be in the home of Lehigh Tingen Smith, who is part of the great Jesse N Smith family. He is one of 9 living grandchildren that are left with us. We're so grateful to have him and to have these other grandkids. and thankful for his time and sharing his thoughts and his testimony about being a grandchild of Jesse N Smith. So, Lehi, if you could just give us a little bit of information about yourself and your family.
Well, I'm not very practiced at this, so there may be a few bumps along the way. I've always considered myself to be very, very blessed as one of the descendants of Jesse N Smith and Emma Ellen Larson Smith. I've always greatly appreciated and have enjoyed all my associations with the grandchildren whom I have known. I have gone to school with them. I have played with them in my neighborhood. It has been a joy to be associated with such a remarkable group of individuals. I have always appreciated the fact that we all enjoyed the lasting legacy of Jesse N Smith in his teachings, in his example, and I knew exactly what sort of people I was associating with if they were descendants of Jesse N Smith. When we lived in Heber. Dad was the school teacher there in Heber, the lone school teacher. And we would spend every summer in Snowflake. And there in that location, I had several of the cousins that I knew, approximately the same age. And so I became well acquainted with many of them. I guess all of whom are now dead.
Who were some of the cousins you spent?
Jesse Mons, Broadbent, Karna, Emma, Broadbent, Uncle Asel's children, Philip and Henry, and Maria, Marion. They were all right there, close by. And I've been very close to several of the next generation cousins, which I didn't understand at the time were of a different generation. I just knew they were my cousins. Went to school with them. Often was in a class with Esther and Buna Pierce and even others, but I was sitting right next to Esther a lot of the time because our names, we were seated in alphabetical order, and Esther was often seated right by me because of the sameness of our names. And so I enjoyed the close friendships and relationships that I developed there. We particularly enjoyed talking with Aunt Em, my grandmother. I spent more time, I guess, with Grandma when the kids were playing in the yard because she had a lot of interesting stories to tell. I once asked my grandmother why she chose to marry Jesse N Smith. And she said, well, without hesitation, she said, well, I knew him to be an honorable and good man, and that he would be a good father to my children. And that was, matter of fact, that was it.
So you felt like she very much loved him, and
she developed a love for him.
yeah.
I have learned that at one time, Mons Larson, her father, lived with his family right there in Snowflake. And so grandfather had become acquainted with her, but they had moved to the Gila Valley. And I think he courted her and married her, going all the way down to Gila Valley to be there with them. But anyway, Grandma had an enduring love for her dear husband, and I think she lived in very hard times.
She was a widow for quite a few years of her life. Yeah.
She was a widow. Oh yes, the hard times of her life were not while her husband was alive. But I think she I think my father was about 13 years of age when his father died. So he was one of the younger children. And that means that, for example, that I'm still here as one of the youngest grandchildren. Of course, there were others much younger than I.
And your dad was George Albert Smith.
My father was George Albert Smith, and my mother, Phocia Humphreys Smith.
And who was your dad named after?
You know, I didn't know that my mother's full name was Aurora Phocia Humphreys Smith. But anyway, she's in a lot of the records as Aurora Phocia Smith. My father's family, there were 4 children. My older sister, Phocia, named after her mother. My brother, George Humphreys Smith, taking my mother's maiden name as his middle name. And I was named for my uncle Lehi Larson Smith, grandmother's brother, who was very close to my father. And he was killed in World War I. And so I was named Lehi Tingen Smith, Tingen being my maternal grandmother's maiden name. And having a last name of Smith, it was nice to have a very different first name. And particularly with my first name and middle name, I was the only individual ever to have that name. And that was nice because my brother named for my father, George Smith, You go to we used to have these telephone books, and there'd be page after page after page of George Smith. So he had some difficulty establishing an identity.
Because it sounded kind of common, you're saying.
It was
many George Smiths, yeah.
George Smith, John Smith. There are common names that can easily be confused. When he started getting bills from other George Smiths that were really other George Smiths, he started using his full name of George Humphreys, and that distinguished him.
And did your dad did he ever share any memories, or did you ever ask what it was like? Was he there when his father passed away? Of course, he was only 13. Did he ever share any memories about that at all?
Not too many. I remember him mentioning wearing hand-me-down clothes. He would see grandfather regularly, but I guess being one of the younger children, he didn't get much attention. But he was always really felt blessed to be a son of Jesse Nathaniel Smith, because everybody knew who Jesse Nathaniel Smith was. So that kind of gave him a leg up in the conversation. One thing that puzzled me a little bit as a young kid, we quite naturally, because our cousins spoke the same language we did, and everybody, all the older men and women were known as uncle and aunt. So Uncle Aisel, Uncle Hiram, whoever, and it turns out some of those uncles were really my cousins. But anyway, it seemed to work well for us to be calling them uncle and aunt. And it always puzzled me when Dad was in his younger years, and I was alive, of course. It puzzled me that these old men would say to my dad, he always called my dad Uncle George, because he was their uncle. But that seemed to me to be just backwards of what it should have been. We've had a great family relationship in the family of George and Photius Smith, and I have been extremely well blessed in my own family. I married Georgia Bateman Smith. We have had 4 sons. We were unsuccessful in having any larger family than that. And we have had 15 grandchildren, I think, and I don't know how many great-grandchildren at this point, but even our great-grandchildren are getting older. We have deacons, and we're going to be going to another baptism, and so they're growing up. All of them are strong, faithful in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
So going back to your grandma, how would you describe her? How do you remember her?
She was a very calm, composed person. She always seemed to be well in control of all of her emotions. In every way, she was very gentle, a very gentle and caring person. I would have to say that she was one of the most ideal persons I have known in my own life. It's hard to describe someone who has no faults. I never heard her swear. I never heard her. Oh, she did sometimes, not often, but sometimes she would speak of the hard times that they had. I remember saying that at one time all they had was a bag of beans to eat. And relative to that, her habits and her cooking held over from her earlier life, I guess, when she would cook a chicken. We ate the neck, the gizzard, the heart, the liver of the chicken, and the feet. You'd be surprised the amount of meat on the feet. Grandma used to cook the feet and peel after it had boiled for a certain amount of time. She would peel the outer layer off the feet, and there's chicken meat underneath. And I remember at one point eating chicken feet, and of course always the neck. Those are items that are always thrown away or ground up for dog food or something nowadays. But I never see them in the marketplace for sale. But I guess her husband, being the state president, very often the visiting authority would sit at her dinner table and they would be in the home, and how she would then feed the leftovers, which was usually the parts that I mentioned, to the kids. One of the things about having lived that way, it sure makes you help to appreciate the blessings that we have today, the ready availability of food, the abundance, the great abundance that I think even the poor among us, the great abundance that they enjoy. You occasionally hear of someone dumpster diving, getting food from dumpsters. And even that would never have occurred back in those days because they did not discard a thing. I remember one time we had a pan of milk that had soured and gone to clabber. And Grandma was sitting there eating the curds and whey.
She made it work. She made it work to use it still.
Yeah, and she acted like she was enjoying it. I think that had happened to her a lot.
Did you say she lived with you guys for a while?
Yes. We had the good fortune. My mother had to be away to school. We had an opportunity for her to receive a salary for the work she was already doing, and so she went to school for a period of time, and Grandma would come in and take care of the family. But it gave me opportunity to become rather well acquainted with Grandma. And it was always a joy to be around Grandma. When I was going to high school there in Snowflake during the noon hour, I would often go down to Grandma's house there, straight down from the high school.
On 2nd West in Snowflake, huh? Still there, the Memorial House.
Yeah, it's now the Memorial House. And I'd chop wood for her and do various things, but sometimes just sit and visit with her for a time. She was a wonderful woman. I'm sure a good choice by grandfather. He knew who he was marrying.
Absolutely.
And all his wives, I'm sure he was very deliberate and wise and guided by the Lord in the choices he made. This is the descendants of Jesse N Smith in any generation have all seemed to retain in large measure those values, those purposes of Jesse N Smith. It is indeed an unusual gathering of people.
Absolutely. So how do you feel being one of the last 9 living grandchildren of Jesse N Smith, who was born in December of 1834, and how do you feel being the last remaining family member, last remaining child of George Albert and Fosia Smith?
Well, I'll say, first of all, I'm surprised.
Mm-hmm.
I never, in my wildest dreams, ever imagined that I would live to this age of 95, soon to be 96. And it has been an unusual experience, I'll say that. It's a little sad. Of course, I guess as you bury succeeding individuals, close relatives, close acquaintances, members of the family. It's a sad parting. I hate to see them go. My dear friend Claire Decker, friend and cousin. Claire Decker used to live close by. We used to go to the temple together until his memory, he died not too many years after he started having Alzheimer's. And it was sad, his dying. I had, fortunately, his wife and contact with his family were still in our ward. But it seems like about every ward I go into, I will find descendants of Jesse N Smith, which indicates to me that all are holding true to the faith as he would have us do. None are really presumptuous or offensive in any way. It's always a joy to spend time with any and every descendant of grandfather that I encounter. It's just a comfortable and pleasant experience, and one that I've always appreciated and enjoyed. But time does move on, and most of them that I was close to are now passing on, and I'm sure we'll continue until we all may ourselves join the family again as we pass through the veil. Hopefully each of us will be true and faithful. A testimony of the gospel is a great blessing. I remember one of the seminary teachers saying that we of all people are the most blessed people on the earth if we receive no other blessing but to have a testimony of the gospel, the restoration, the divinity of this work. We will be the most blessed of all people. But of course that carries a responsibility. We have a responsibility of living the gospel and sharing the gospel in any way we can, through being good neighbors, through serving missions in so many different ways, doing work for a dead. I always appreciate those who give us reminders of just how choice and precious our heritage is as being descendants of Jesse N Smith. I've never, some people kind of snort and turn their heads and oh, you're a descendant of a polygamist. I've never felt that as an insult, because I've always been proud. Well, maybe I can't use that word, but I've always been very thankful that I am a descendant of a polygamist, because it has turned out to be such a blessing in so many ways, and continues to be so to this day.
Well, Lehi, thank you for your time. Of course, there's so many more things I know we could talk about, but thank you for sharing these thoughts with the Jesse N Smith family, with posterity. So special, such a special time to be here with you. So thank you for sharing these thoughts.
Let me just make one final comment.
Please.
I sure appreciate those of our family who take it upon themselves to make records and share experiences among family members, calling reunions, organizing, and keeping things alive and touching the hearts of all of us. I appreciate it and hope they feel always appreciated in the work they're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for this special interview.
Smith, daughter of Akins and Emma May Smith, youngest grandchild of Jesse N and Emma Smith.
Go ahead. Tell us who you are, though.
I'm wife to Joseph Dale Smith, who
Okay.
is son of Akins and Emma.
And she's part of the Palmer family.
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'm Joseph Dale Smith. I can remember my thinking about Grandpa Jesse N as a young boy. Of course, he was long gone when I came on the scene. My dad was only 7 when his father passed away. So I can remember a few things about my dad. The story is told, and I don't know the details, but his father was giving a blessing or something, and my dad said something like, "Grandpa, can you give me a blessing too?" Anyway, I can remember also as a young man when my dad grew a little beard and represented his father at a Parowan reunion. I was just a very young boy then. And it was unusual because my dad never wore a beard. But to me, he looked more like his father than any of the other boys that I know of, my uncles. Anyway, I've always had a great respect for Jesse N. He had a great testimony. He was strong and faithful in his church assignment. And I have treasured his journal, and I read it a lot while I was on my mission. And the things I remember about him are very few. But I look forward to meeting him one day. He shared a great legacy in that part of the country. He's well known, and I'm proud to be his grandson.
Thank you, Dale. Okay, go ahead.
I'm Marianne Smith. Can you erase that?
You're good. It's like candid camera. You're good.
All right.
You're wonderful. No, you're okay. This is good.
I'm Marianne Smith Bratt.
Hey.
I am the descendants of Jesse N Smith. And when I went away to BYU, I happened by chance to see something in the school newspaper about the Smith Cousins Club, and I read it, and I found out it was for descendants of Jesse N Smith, so I started going to that and met some members of the family from Utah and that were at BYU, and that was really cool. That really helped my freshman year that year. And like I said, just proud to be a descendant.
Thank you, Marion.
I'm Jean Palmer. I'm a granddaughter of Jesse N Smith, which a lot of people find astounding. My daughter-in-law was up in Utah and she met someone who was about a 6th generation granddaughter. And they told my granddaughter there's no way that your mother-in-law could be a granddaughter. And my daughter-in-law said, well, I think she is, but she didn't dare say that I said it was, because she had to come back home and verify that that was true. But growing up, I really didn't know my grandfather because he had died years before, and it was more like he was some famous historical person out there that we knew about. And in fact, he's still kind of a legend all around this area. Everybody, if you say his name, they know who he is. So if you can go and say you're Jesse N Smith's relative, then they know who you're related to.
And so who we would call Aunt M. Well, you're the youngest. You're the youngest in the family, right?
Yes.
So how did you hear about Grandpa Jesse N? I mean, would you hear stories?
Well,
Kind of being on the tail end?
yeah, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because I like his journal.
Absolutely. Was anyone alive when Aunt M, of course I call her Aunt M, and Aunt M is really, she's special in my heart because she took care of my great-grandma. So it was the two Emmas, and she really took care of mine because she was the first and she got older and he was deceased. And so I really love Aunt M. But was anyone alive when she was alive? I think she died in the late 40s, didn't she? Or so
When I was 1 year old.
when you were 1? So Dale, do you remember her at all?
Barely.
Barely?
I remember Grandma Smith.
Okay. Do you have some memories that you might be able to recall of her talking to you or doing something with you or how she was, anything like that?
I can remember going to her place in Snowflake one time
Okay.
with my parents, and I can't remember much more about it than that. We went out to the barn out back or whatever. I can vaguely remember that Grandma Smith was a special lady. She took care of a lot of people, and they helped with a lot of babies and things like that.
Yeah, she is a midwife, right? Yeah.
She was going to come to help your mom with you, but she got sick or something.
Yeah.
But she did deliver the 2 oldest kids of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember any impressions of her? Like when you saw her? Can you remember any?
She's a beautiful lady.
Yeah.
And she was what I would call a true pioneer type lady. She's good looking. But I don't know, some of the people were a little funny looking.
Now, where did the name Akins come from?
From Jesse Ann's mother.
So it's from, it
Jesse Ann's mother.
was her mother, right?
It's her maiden name.
So do you guys know whose idea it was to name him Akins? Was he? No.
I don't know.
It's a good name. She was a good lady. Mary Aiken Smith, really an amazing lady. So he got a really good name. Yeah.
We have a little story about that. Not about her grave, but we went to Parowan, and we just accidentally came around the corner and found Jesse N Smith's home that he built there. And there was a sign, and it had 4 different phone numbers you could call to take a tour. So I called 3 of them, and I didn't get an answer. I called this last one, and this man answered. I couldn't tell you who he was. And I said, we'd like to take a tour of the Jesse N Smith home. And he said, I'm really busy. I can't do it now. I said, well, we're from out of town. And I said, my husband is a grandson of Jesse N. I'll be right there. So he came and gave us a tour.
You guys have some pull, you know. So what did your dad die of? When
Your dad died of?
was it a heart attack?
Massive.
And then do you have 2 siblings that have passed on? Is it Charles C? Am I saying that correctly? Charles C. and then K. Was it K?
Yeah, but we also count Vance and Genevieve.
Okay, so those were the 2 kids from his first marriage, right? And
This is their posterity.
and this is their posterity. Say hi, guys.
Hi. Yeah.
So thank you for being with us.
They
So
probably have some thoughts about Jesse N too.
do you guys have some stories or something that maybe
Your mom and dad.
they passed on to you?
Just really quickly, I remember as a small kid knowing that this guy named Jesse N Smith was my great-grandfather, and he was born way a long time ago and died way a long time ago. And on the other side of my family, I had another great-grandfather who was alive. And I just, in my small little kid brain, I thought, how can this be? But I knew that Jesse N was a very important and well-known historical figure, is kind of how I looked at him, and I felt pride in him.
Thank you. Any other thoughts?
I was struck. I'm in the middle of my siblings' age-wise, but I remember taking trips when I was a child and piling into a very small car and driving across the desert with my parents and my siblings, and then coming to this small town. We lived in suburban Southern California, and coming to a small town. And I think I was aware of Jesse N Smith's name, and just the name was so powerful to my mind. But my impression was, when I met family, just the tremendous pride and regard they had for Jesse N to begin with, but then all of their family. So that's always compelled me, is just this deep pride. And now that I'm just recently kind of getting to know more about Jesse N, I knew he's a big historical figure, but I didn't know details. It's astounding everything he did. So it's just exciting, and I'm proud to be part of it.
Thank you. So do you go through Genevieve?
Yes.
Okay, so you're Genevieve.
Mark.
They're all just.
Okay, Genevieve. All Genevieve. Okay, everyone here is through Genevieve. Did you have a story?
Well, Carol, our sister, told about our mom remembering brushing our grandma, Emma Larson Smith's hair, and it was long and it was angelic green, and just running the comb through her hair. And our mom loved her and wasn't very old when she passed. But she loved her.
And do you know how did they meet? How did Emma and Jesse meet? Does anyone know that story?
She lived across the street from them. her family did. The Mons Larson family lived across the street from Jesse N. She was only 18.
And wasn't he about 50 or something?
In his 40s.
In his 40s?
I think he was
He'd be mid-40s, I think.
Okay. And I heard a little story. I don't know if you guys can confirm if it's true, but that at first she was kind of like, I don't know about this polygamy thing. Is that accurate?
I heard that from my mother.
Did you?
Yes.
That was my understanding, was that she's kind of like, no. And then she got a testimony of the Spirit, talked to her, and amazing lady though. 9 kids, yeah. And I guess there was kind of a little break there because they had George A, and then there was kind of a space between him and your dad, right? And then your dad was kind of the oldest of that second group because there was Akins and Myrtle and Foss at the end, right? Okay. So was Hiram kind of a father figure to your dad and kind of some of those younger kids? Do you think?
I don't know, but I can remember Uncle Hiram. He was tall and straight.
Yeah.
He stood straight up. And we were always impressed with him. He was like a patriarchal figure. And we would see him once in a while. He'd come by. So I don't know a whole lot about Hiram, but he was a great uncle.
Well, thank you guys. So any other thoughts, anything you'd want to let posterity know?
I received my middle name as my mother's maiden name, Genevieve Smith. And I've always been proud of that. And if anybody writes my name, it has to have Smith or the S, or I won't accept it. and I said, well, where did you get Smith from? Well, from my dad, Aiken Smith. And I go, wow, I got his name. And then eventually I found out about Jesse N Smith. And I got from him too, Smith. So I've always been proud of the name Smith.
Thank you
very much.
Something we definitely should be, right? So, Beverly, any parting thoughts? No? You're good? Well, thank you for sharing what you did share. Any parting thoughts?
I have kind of a funny story about Uncle Foss. Him and his wife, I can't remember his name. Anyway, they came to stay with us for a night, and we had this son, Jay, that liked to sleep with us. And we gave them our bed, and I told Uncle Foss, I said, if you get a visitor tonight, don't be surprised. But I had nightmares of it. I even remember sitting up in bed and yelling, Jay, no, and he wasn't even around. But the next morning I was telling Foss about this dream I had, and he says, well, Jay slept most of the night with us. So they were really good people. We really liked Uncle Foss.
Thank you. Any parting thoughts, Dale?
Yes. We served a mission in Nauvoo in 2008, Deanna and I. And we had a lot of good thoughts about Jesse N Smith. He was a boy of about 12, I think, when they were driven out. And so we remembered that my grandfather walked these streets. He was here where we are now. And we felt a closeness with him. And we also wanted to find out a little bit more about our great-grandfather, Silas Smith, Jesse's dad, who passed away in Pittsfield, Illinois. That was just south of Quincy, and we went down to Quincy a time or two while we were on a mission. Some missionary friend told us it's a great place down there called the Best Buffet. Chinese food. Boy, we went there a time or two. And when we went back a year or two after our mission, and we went down to Quincy. And while we were there in that cafe, I told my wife, let's go down to Pittsfield and see where Silas is buried. So that Pittsfield is south of Quincy, 30 miles or so. Well, we went down there, had no idea where to go. So we started asking around and ended up, where'd we go first?
We went to the courthouse first. They said, we don't have records here. We went, they would go over they sent us to one of the government places there. So we went there and they said, no, we don't have records. They sent us to the library, to go to the library. So we finally went to the library and pick it up.
Yeah. We went there and this lady said, well, there are 3 cemeteries here in town, so which one do you want? One is a Catholic cemetery and a couple others. We had no idea. I said he wouldn't be there because he was a Mormon. And she said, we don't have any, we want to know about when it was that he was passed away.
Yeah.
So we told her what her date was, and she couldn't find anything with his name in any of those records that she had. But she said, I remember about 5 miles east of town used to be a sign on the fence, Mormontown.
Yeah, but she said, their parents, we just happened to get this only lady that could help us because her parents wrote some books that had all the records of the cemeteries. And she found a small little thing that said Mormontown on it, cemetery. Little tiny one. Then we went.
Well, anyway, she said about 5 miles east of town, out there on the north side, used to be this little sign, Mormontown. And so we went looking for that. And we didn't see anything. And on the way back, I said, wait, there's a sign right up against the fence, against the big cornfield that's there. And I got out, walked over and read that sign, and I want to show it to you. It says Mormontown sign. This is a historical marker that was put up there, and it told the story. Can you read that, Mom? It's very simple.
Okay.
But it talks about Silas.
On February 12th, let me get this way. No, I won't go that way. Okay, on February 12th, 1839, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, refugees driven from Missouri under the extermination order of Governor Lilburn Boggs, settled on this site. The property was owned by Thomas Edwards, who later joined the church. Silas Smith, high priest of the church and uncle of Mormon prophet Joseph Smith, was the leader of these Mormon refugees. The community grew to more than 300 members. Silas Smith died on September 13th, 1839 at the age of 58 and was buried here near his home. Smith was succeeded by John Lawton and later by Harlow Redfield, who presided over the congregation until it disbanded in 1845. In October 1842, Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball preached at a church conference here. The settlement, which later became known as Mormontown, extended on both sides of the road of this location. Cabins were built and wells dug. A schoolhouse and a church were erected on the south side of the road. The gravestones were bulldozed into a ditch, and the graveyard plowed over. The church building was relocated to Pittsfield and used as a parish hall by St. Mary's Catholic Church. The pews and pulpit were moved to a church near Pleasant Hill. So
Thank you.
that made us sick when we heard
Yes.
about him under. But
Yep.
we figured Grandpa was probably happy because it had the most beautiful cornfield on top of it.
Wow. That's well, thank you for sharing.
Carol, did you have something to share about Jesse N?
Jean, do you have anything else? Or Marianne?
No, I was just gonna mention, when I was either high school or college, they had a huge Jesse N Smith reunion in Snowflake. And it was at the Main Street Chapel, part of it anyway, and I just remember it filled with that whole chapel and the hall behind the chapel with people. Somebody wrote a skit about the five wives, and I was honored to play my grandmother.
Wow.
Or to read her parts anyway. That's just a memory I have.
Wonderful.
So, anyway, that's it.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's when they got the house ready, the Jesse N Smith home ready for people to go visit and so forth. I don't know if it was an open house or what it was called. But anyway, my sister Charles and I were asked to play piano duet. And they had the piano set up on the front porch. And everybody who was attending was they were on the lawn. We started playing our duet, and we're just playing away, and all of a sudden, thunder, lightning, rain. I mean, it poured. we were on the porch playing our little. So anyway, yeah, that was interesting. I guess that's all I have.
Thank you. So we've been here with Jean, Marianne, Dale, Deanna, and Beverly, and also the grandchildren of Genevieve from the first marriage. So children. So thank you all for your time.
Jesse N.
Yes. So thank you so much.
We are the surviving 4 or 5 children of Foss and Cleon Smith. I'm Norman.
I'm Linnea, second child.
I'm Kevin, formerly known as Steve. I'm David, the youngest. It's the baby of the family.
Perfect. So we're going to just start you visiting about your family and maybe ask some questions and get you talking about the experiences that you remember and some of the important things in your life that you want to have recorded here. So maybe one of you could start talking a little bit about your parents, maybe how they met, where you lived, the first part of their marriage and your lives.
First, we ought to talk about the one who's missing.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Doreen, class of the family.
I don't know. We're all classy.
Well, she was a good one, though. That's for sure.
That's true.
A sweetheart. Yeah.
That's true.
And she passed away about a year and a half ago?
Yeah.
A year ago?
November, so a little over a year and a half ago.
There was Matthias Foskali Smith, who was the 44th child of Jesse Nathaniel Smith and the 5th wife, youngest child overall. He is the first cousin of Joseph Jr. So they come from a prestigious family in church history. Our mother, Cleona, was part of her maiden name was Olson. Her parents were not married at the time. They both, in their families, moved to the San Luis Valley in southern Colorado. They met there. They were both 30, and they got married at 30. Mom had two brothers and one sister, and two of them died in infancy.
Correction on that. Grandpa's family never moved there.
Oh, didn't he? They stayed Mountain Green.
The way I've heard the story is that the Jensen family, Grandma's family, moved there. That were some of the original settlers. And shortly after Grandpa got back from his mission, came home to Fountain Green, Utah, Grandma came over to visit her remaining family there. At which point they met. Of course, Grandma's home was in Colorado, and Grandpa ended up following her there.
Yeah, to Richfield.
So he was the only one of his family who was there.
Yeah, they met in Richfield Branch, and that whole town is gone now. It's not survived.
And they were both Danish.
Both Danish.
Yeah.
Full-blooded Danish, and proud of being Danish. So now, you want to talk about your connections and things that have interested you?
Oh, you mentioned when they met. Mom and Dad originally met at BYU. I don't know too much of the particulars. I do remember a story that Mother used to bring up about how did it go. It's a line from a famous poem. Anyway, the story was that as I got it, they were in a speech class together, and I guess that's where they met.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
And Dad got up and started to recite a poem, and he couldn't get past the first or second line. Mother used to tease him about that. Wasn't it something about at midnight or something?
I have a rendezvous with death at midnight at some lonely barricade. That's as much as I can do. But Mom called him an old man. He was a returned missionary, had served a mission in Sweden. And so he was older than the average student there at, what was then BY? Was it an academy or university already?
But what?
Was it BY Academy when they went there?
No, I don't think so.
I think so. It probably was university. But she thought he was a very good-looking older man.
I heard they went to the matinee dances, and that's where they got acquainted at the matinee dances. Some mom or dad told me about that, which were like an afternoon dance in the middle of the week.
Oh yeah.
And those when I was
They had those when I was at the Y.
And there was, I remember seeing some dance cards that were filled out.
Oh yeah.
That Mom had saved from these dances and had the names of all the people, the boys that she had promised to dance with. I can't remember names on the dance card, but on the back of one of them, she made some comment to the effect that they had gone, she and Dad had gone to one of the apartments where one of her friends, or maybe it's where she was living, and they only had one piece of furniture in there that was comfortable. It was a upholstered chair. And so the couples took turns using the chair. And they thought that was a great treat.
Using it for what?
To cuddle. Oh. I suppose.
Okay.
What's the age difference between your parents?
5 years.
5 years. Okay.
Same as with me and my husband.
Dad was born in 1905. Mom in 1910.
Perfect.
Just a comment about this year, or 2015, people cannot comprehend that we are one generation removed from the 1846 or 1847 pioneers.
Yeah, that's true.
And,
That's always interesting. When I tell people my grandfather came to Salt Lake Valley in 1847, they either immediately catch on and ask about it, or else they just pass it over.
Exactly.
And I always wonder, but it's because they think I really mean great-great-grandpa or something like that.
Yeah, same
It just doesn't dawn on them.
Nobody I have told that to has ever immediately caught on and asked about it. They just think I'm stupid.
Yeah.
That is very unique. That is not.
It really is.
Well, not only the fact of being there, but the fact that Jesse N Smith at age 13 drove his widowed mother's team and wagon across the plains.
Yeah,
And his brother, 2 years older, drove the wagon of their Uncle John Smith.
I know that some days he
That's
herded the
patriarch.
cattle.
He was the
Came
church
up behind the
patriarch,
cattle.
wasn't
That's John the
he? Uncle
patriarch.
John was the church patriarch at the time, right? And I believe he had married Jesse N's and Silas's mother as a
Sister, yeah.
as a second wife or a additional wife to take care of his brother's wife, a Levitical marriage, they call it.
I hadn't thought of that until you mentioned it. But yeah, I have heard that.
They were sealed, I'm pretty sure. Sealed for time at any rate.
That's great. So where did your parents settle then after school and they got married? Where was their?
Well, they were in Provo for, I guess, at least a year because I was born in Provo while Dad was still in school. And I remember pictures of them holding me as a baby and Dad in a cap and gown. So I assume he graduated in 1934, the year I was, that'd be a few months after I was born. And he went to teach school in Bisbee, Arizona. And all I know is what I've heard him say about the fact that I was a baby in Bisbee. I think they were only there 1 year.
Right.
And then they went to Romeo, Colorado, I think, which was mother's country, and taught school there for a year, I believe.
They did in Romeo?
Yeah. I'm not absolutely certain. Mother did. Maybe I'm getting mixed up. Maybe Mother taught a year. Yeah, I think that was it. Mother went to BYU for a year or two, and then taught school in Romeo for a year, and then they were married, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, they did
It's
have
too
a lot
long
of time.
since I reviewed the timeline on it, but
Yeah.
Where were they living when you were born, Linnea?
That was, I don't know where they were living. I was born in the family cabin in Snowflake, the one that was our grandmother's, her wife's cabin. And she delivered me. She was a midwife. She supported her family doing that after Grandma died. Grandpa Smith died, Jesse Nathaniel, when our father was about 6 months old. So he would have been around 76 when our dad died. Quite a big difference in age.
Our dad was born.
Right.
Oh, yeah, is that what I said? Yeah, when her dad was.
So, okay. So then you were born in Snowflake, delivered by your grandmother.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay. And then Doreen is next. And where did the family live when she was born?
Well, she was born in Mesa.
yeah, I'm not sure where the family, they didn't ever live permanently in Mesa, but she was born there.
They sound like gypsies.
Yes.
That's the impression I had, that the life was really hectic for a long time.
It's interesting because I counted up last night and I went to 8 different schools in my grade 1 to grade 12. These 2 guys went to the same school in town all their lives.
Well, we had, David did. I had 4 years in Colorado.
Oh, 4?
Uh-huh.
Okay. That's right. I remember you did.
I was the only one that had a stable childhood.
Yeah.
That's why you're normal now?
That's why I'm the most normal one.
Oh.
Well, we'll leave that one.
So Kevin, where were they when you were born then?
Well, I was born in Winslow. The family home was in Joseph City, and I don't know what the employment situation was for Dad and Mom at that time.
Now we're reaching the point where I remember what was going on. Dad was teaching in Joe City, and he'd been there, I believe, when we first moved there. We lived in a small apartment in the back side of Grandma Hanson's house. They called her Grandma Hanson. She was the mother of...
That's my first memory too, was Grandma Hanson's house.
Yeah, she lived in... Grandma Hanson was the mother of several of the Hansons that married the Smiths, including Aunt May, who we knew best. Anyhow, I think they lived there 1 year before I started school. And I started school in Joe City and went to school there for 3 years. So I guess probably the family must have lived there for 4 years. But anyway, back to Kevin being born. I remember during my early years, I was always wishing I had a brother. Well, I finally got one.
The age of 9.
I have a pretty distinct memory of going to the maternity hospital. There was a small maternity hospital in Winslow where Kevin was born. And we went in and they wouldn't let us go in. I think Mother was in there for a week.
Yeah.
Anyhow, they held him up behind the window for us to see.
I didn't. What's the story about you coming up with my name? What's the deal there?
Mom had a little booklet that was put out by the Shell Oil.
I don't remember who.
But they were it was to advertise ethyl gas because they had just started adding ethyl to the gasoline. And in this book, this little "What's in a Name" it was called, was Kevin's name. And Mom didn't know how to pronounce it, and she couldn't remember how to spell it because she didn't have it with her when she had to fill out the birth certificate. For the first several years of his life, he was called Kevin, and his name was spelled with an A. Still is.
He's still called Kevin by a certain sort of people.
I insisted on it until I was coming to the close of my mission, and I was not going to be Elder Smith anymore. And I thought, well, okay, if I got to go back to this fight with Kevin for everybody to say, what? Oh, I just give up and call myself Kevin, although I really feel like Kevin.
So until you were 21-ish,
Yes.
it was Kevan, Kevan,
Yes.
pronounced Kevan.
Yes.
And now you say it Kevin.
Yeah.
Not me.
Awesome. Not you.
I still call him Kevin.
Yeah, which you would, if that's what you did growing up.
Yeah.
It took me a while to get switched over, but I guess you prefer it switched over at this point.
No, I used to, coming from you, I ought to be Kevin.
Doreen and I really did want him to be Kevin.
Yeah.
It was just so
embarrassing.
I remember the conflict when you would call him Kevin and others would call him Kevin when we were kids.
Yeah.
So, and he liked Kevin at the
He
time,
probably
so
is.
I was sticking up for you, bro.
Yes.
He probably has a personality disorder.
I do.
Truth were known.
I thought Kevin was a sissy.
Kevin? Oh. Interesting.
That was a great story.
Her husband is named for him. I mean,
Yeah,
yours.
that's right.
So his is misspelled.
That's right.
It's spelled right.
And mispronounced.
It's becoming more and more, I see it more and more, and it's bad.
Well, your son named his daughter Kevin.
Yeah, with 2 E's.
Yeah, the two E's, so they know how to pronounce
So it's going to continue.
it.
It's a tradition.
That's a great
Your
story.
Kevin does spell it with an I, doesn't he?
No, he spells it with an A as well.
Yeah.
Well, there's another story related to that same thing. The folks wanted to hold off on having Kevin blessed until we went up to Colorado and Grandpa could perform the blessing. Well, we got there and Grandpa, for whatever reason, started calling you Keithus.
He did not like the name Kevin.
Is that why?
Oh yeah, he thought it was just a nothing name.
Yeah.
So he called him Keithus.
That's his middle name's Foss, so it's
And-
Kevin Foss.
Yeah, so it's Kevin Foss.
Is that where it
And
came
Grandma
from?
called him Keithus. And I remember Mom saying, if he blesses that baby with Keithus, I am going to be so upset. He told her he wouldn't, but he did.
Yeah, he did. Oh, I was there and I started crying. I was so upset.
Thought that he was going to have to be Keithus all his life.
Maybe that's what happened, who knows?
Anyway, Mother consoled me with the fact that it wouldn't stay that way.
Yeah. I think we should start calling him Keithus now.
That's
Then he'd be mixed up with his granddaughter.
Norman, you were just grateful to have a brother when Kevin was born.
Yes, I was.
Made it all right.
Almost. Turned out there was too much of an age difference for him to ever really be a pal of mine.
Yeah.
However, for my youthful recollection, I was always tagging along with Norman to see what he was working on. He had his workbench, he had his stuff, and he's always, keep your cotton picking hands off my stuff.
I don't remember
We all got that one.
Fortunately.
Stay away from my stuff.
Well, speaking of that, I put in a word about our cousin Kay, who was
Son of Akins, Dad's brother.
Dad's brother Akins, who was my best buddy when we were kids. We lived right next door to each other in Joe City. Kay and I were virtually inseparable. Kay ultimately didn't see much of him after we moved, and then finally, while he was in high school, he got nephritis and fought illness ever after, finally died at age 29.
Yeah, it was really a sad thing. And his older brother Vance, Uncle Ake's first son, had been killed in World War II over Italy. He was pilot. So he didn't have any sons, some daughters at home.
So in Joe City, it sounds like you lived by family.
Yes, that's our
So you have
dad's
some-
brother. In fact, there were a lot of the families there we were related to, with the polygamous family.
Yeah.
That happens in small towns. What?
What you said, weren't related to.
You were related to quite a number of people there.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Nearly the whole town, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we lived on Route 66,
Oh.
right on the highway. It was about 6 yards or so from our front door.
Tell me a little bit about the house that you lived in.
Dad built that house.
Dad built it, and they built it out of old railroad ties. Somewhere they'd gotten a connection to buy a bunch of old railroad ties, and the outer walls of that house are made of railroad ties standing on end and fastened together, and then plastered on the inside.
It's gotta be sturdy.
Yeah.
It's sturdy house.
It's got a foundation.
How many bedrooms in that house?
It had
2,
two.
3. Did you have a
No,
bedroom?
very small now that we.
Yeah, really small.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Thinking back on it, didn't realize it at the time, but it was a pretty small house.
Yeah, very. We looked at it in 2005 when we went down to celebrate our dad's 100th birthday, and it was amazingly small. Yeah.
It had an attached garage, which was fairly unusual
It was
at the time.
2006.
Did we? I thought
It didn't have a door connecting it into the house. You had to go out the garage doors to get from the garage to the house. At least it was part of the building.
So at that point, there was mom and dad and 4 kids living.
Three.
Yeah, just 3. We didn't have David yet.
Kevin was
Well,
born.
Doreen.
That's
So 4, right?
Well, we moved immediately after
Kevin was born. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Weeks, literally.
Okay. So how many years between Kevin, you and David?
2 years and 10 months.
Okay.
No, 2 years and 10 months.
Oh, yeah,
2
2 years.
years and 10 months.
Yeah.
And so then-
You wanna keep it short.
Yeah, I am. I'm good with the 3 years.
Same, diesel.
So where were they living when you were born, David?
The family lived in Clarkdale, Arizona. I guess that was a mining town.
It was a smelter.
Oh, a smelter.
The mining
The
was
mines were
Jerome.
up the road in Jerome. Okay.
Yeah.
But I was born down the road about only 3 miles away in Cottonwood, where the hospital was. And then, so I have no recollection of that place at all because we moved when I was a year old. And, but I've been back to see it. It's interesting to see.
Yeah, Cottonwood is really grown.
Yes.
But Clarkdale looks just like it has looked for
Yeah.
as long as I can remember.
Yeah, like just like
Yeah.
when we lived there. One thing about him being born in Cottonwood, it wasn't a big hospital then. And so when the mothers came in, they had to stay for at least a week, like Norman said earlier. But Dad had to bring home all his laundry because the hospital didn't have a laundry. So Dad brought home the dirty diapers and the shirts and things, and I washed them in the what do you
little
call
tub and the,
yeah, ringer washer.
yeah.
And I would be out hanging him in the dark after.
And how old would you have been then?
Thank you, Lene, I appreciate it.
Yeah, you should. I thought that was, I've never come across that arrangement anywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Now that's interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me how, and David, it sounds like that moving really didn't stop until maybe you were how old?
Until I was 6.
6.
Because when I was 1, I guess, about that time, the family moved to I guess Bountiful, Colorado, or in the neighborhood. Bountiful is the first place I can remember, but the older kids will have to tell about exactly where we landed because I don't know that part of the story because I was only 1 year old.
Okay.
I don't know either. Yeah.
What was it like? What kind of memories as far as moving so often? Was it hard when it was happening as you look back on it? How do you feel about that?
Oh yeah, I was brokenhearted.
It was a real mixed blessing all that time.
I can remember crying over leaving, specifically remember crying when we left Snowflake to go to Colorado right after Kevin was born. Speaking of Kevin being born, there's a story that's worth repeating. Our grandmother Smith was essentially dying at the time, and we left our home in Joseph City and stayed in Grandma's house, that big family home in Snowflake. Basically, all we waited for Grandma to die is what we amounted to, and knew it was coming shortly. And at one point, I've heard this, although I don't remember it directly, but Grandma wanted to see Kevin, and so they took him in and showed him to Grandma, and I believe it was that night that she passed away.
I have a grandma's
family told
dying
the story that they felt like Grandma was waiting to see her last grandson before she left.
When Grandma died in June, and stuff like that can be pretty warm, and they had her in one of the bedrooms, and they had jars of ice around her too, so she'd last until I got to the funeral. And I remember going in and looking at her and seeing that she was Grandma, but not Grandma. And I loved to listen to the ladies talk. They'd throw me out when they realized I was in there. But I remember hearing them say to each other that when Grandma died, she had been more or less unconscious most of the time. She opened her eyes and she looked around and she said, "Lehi is here for me." And then she died.
And Lehi was?
Her older son that was killed in World War I.
Wow.
So.
Speaking of that, I still remember waking up in the middle of the night when I didn't realize why, but we were just in the next room to Grandma's apartment. It was because they'd come to get Dad because she was going.
She was going. Wow. Amazing experiences.
Yeah.
What an interesting life. Yeah. So then it sounds like you landed in Colorado. David joins the family. Your dad and mom are both school teachers at this point?
Yeah, they were. They both taught in Sanford School.
Yeah,
first year. Dad was the principal, and Mother taught 6th grade. And when we went to Sanford, I started in the 5th grade. I'd gone through 4 grades in Joseph. Started in the 5th grade, and it turned out that about half the textbooks they were using were ones I'd used in the 4th grade in Arizona, so they moved me up to the 6th grade, which Mother was teaching, so she was my teacher in 6th grade.
Oh, great.
And Linnea was in your 3rd grade that year?
My 3rd grade. Had to learn the multiplication tablet.
Was that the year Doreen started school? She was in 1st grade?
Yeah, I think she was 1st grade there.
Yeah.
And then who would watch the younger two, Kevin and David?
I don't know.
Oh, there was a Lara girl.
That was from Bountiful.
That was later.
Oh.
Yeah.
A year or 2 later.
In Sanford, who did? We were living in that old house.
Somebody told me a story about a lady who lived next door took care of us.
Oh, really?
She wasn't a very kind lady. I guess maybe as Doreen told me this story. And she was pretty gruff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And we were living in a town that we haven't mentioned the name of either.
It was Sanford.
It wasn't Sanford, it wasn't Lara, it wasn't Down.
Was it Excelsior? Because that rings a bell.
Excelsior.
We didn't go there until I was in 7th grade and Norman
That
was.
was later.
Yeah, that was quite a time later.
Okay, well, I don't remember the name of the town, but it was
In Sanford was where we butchered the pig.
But I think this, we lived in that place for about a year.
1 year.
Yeah.
Then we went back to Arizona.
What?
Didn't we go back to Arizona?
Well, let's see, we did.
No. No,
think so.
because Grandma had said he wanted Dad to help him on the farm. And so he had resigned in Sanford to help Grandma on the farm. And then when it came down to really doing it, Grandpa decided he could do it alone for a while longer. So here we were.
Was that the timing on that?
Up on, well, it was the summer of.
Let's see, that was after I fixed this. We went to Clarkdale after 1 year in Sanford.
Is that where we went next? Okay, yeah. Stayed in Clarkdale for 3 years.
So I didn't know the family had been in Colorado before we went back to Clarkdale.
Yeah, 1 year in Sanford.
Oh.
1 year in Sanford, then we
I heard the story about us moving to the Downhill area was that Grandma Olson had died. So Grandpa Olson was feeling lonely and wrote a letter saying he was lonesome and he didn't think he could do things by himself and he wanted help with the farm. And so the family packed up and moved up there without any further correspondence very much. And by the time they got there, we arrived in the driveway essentially, and Grandpa says, "So what did you come here for?"
Yeah.
And it was pretty hard on Dad because he was thinking that Grandpa Olson wanted him to come and partner with him on the farm.
Yeah, that was a real conflict.
Were we in Bountiful for
Yeah.
several years though?
No.
Oh, we lived in Bountiful.
We did when I was in high school. We lived there for, let's say, through 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th, 11th. Yeah, so how many is that? 4 years?
You got more details about that than I ever was aware of. All I knew was Mother had said that they left Clarkdale to go primarily because Grandpa was going to have Dad essentially take over the farm, which didn't happen.
Which is,
And this was your mother's father then, right?
yeah,
Yes.
Grandpa Olson.
Okay. So then did your dad get a teaching job?
Yeah.
Because-
Both Dad and Mom. We moved up to this little old tiny farming community and they called it two things. One was Nortonville and one was Excelsior.
That's the story I'm talking about. And that's
Excelsior
where
was the official
Grundy
name of
lady
the
was
school.
taking care of me, and I guess
Oh, I remember her. I do. I just got one memory of her. I turned 4 and she insisted I take a nap, but I thought at 4 years of age I didn't have to take naps anymore. And she insisted I did, and so I rebelled by opening my eyes when she wasn't in the room, and when I heard her coming, I closed my eyes.
Was that Rogers?
Was that her name?
The year
I
in
didn't know her
Nortonville?
name. What was it?
The year we lived in Nortonville.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kevin and David were cared for by, name was Rogers. They lived about half a mile down the road.
She came to our house.
I remember that.
Not that took the kids there.
Took the kids there.
Her house.
How about that? One 4-year-old memory.
It was a 3-room school. Mom taught 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade in one end classroom. What was her name? Or did you decide?
Mrs. Stewart was.
Taught 4th, 5th, and 6th in the middle classroom. Stewart, okay. And then Dad taught 7th through 12th in the big classroom on the other end.
Wow.
And so I was in Dad's class. Norman was in Dad's class. Yeah.
And would Doreen have been in the middle class then?
I think she was. Yeah, I don't think she was in Mom's class that year.
Okay.
We cleaned the school. We were the janitors. Norman had to go over early morning and build the fires in all the stoves. There was no electricity, no plumbing. Well, we didn't have enough. We did have a bathroom.
Yeah.
Didn't have electricity.
So
we,
you
lived,
did-
we lived in a teacher age, which was
Right.
100 yards from the school.
Okay.
Small house.
Oh, is that where we were living?
Yeah.
I remember
That was a year David wouldn't eat. And Mom was so concerned. He was how old? 3, 2, I don't know. He wouldn't eat. Mom was really, really worried about him. And the doctor said, let him go. If he gets hungry, he'll eat. She could hardly manage that. Just when he gets the grain.
One of my memories from living in that house was a birthday party for Kevin. And I remember him sitting there thinking a high chair. But anyway, he stuffed his mouth so full of cake that he literally couldn't close his mouth. He's sitting there going,
So we were there one year. And then we went, where did we go?
from
Seventh,
Northern.
that was Manasseh. We went
Yeah.
to Manassah after that. Moved back to the farm, out in Grandpa's house. Drove to Manasseh. These are all little tiny settlements that are maybe 10, 15 miles apart.
But it's Mormon, wasn't Mormon settlement country?
Yes, yes, these people had almost all of them from Fountain Green, a lot of them.
Okay.
So Grandma's family was there too, the Jensens, and they lived in Sanford, which is interesting because Sanford was named for Silas Sanford Smith, who was our grandfather's brother.
Okay. And this is all in Colorado,
All in Colorado.
in southern Colorado.
Yes.
Side note, that Silas Sanford Smith is the one who led the Hole in the Rock expedition, the original leader of the Hole in the Rock
He
expedition.
was a very faithful guy.
Got called over to San Luis Valley to be the state president there.
Okay. So it sounds like money was tight.
Yeah.
Jobs sometimes hard to come by. Did you feel that, or did you feel like you just, that's how it was, didn't know any different?
Pretty much that, I think. We knew there was a difference. We knew that we didn't have much money, and I think Mother and Dad were genuinely poor when we were little. But Kevin said something to her when he was how old?
Oh gosh,
You're on
we
your
wasn't. I think the mission was over. I think we were down there to clean the house out. Mom called us all down once to clean the house out of our stuff out of the house in Farmington on Wall Street.
Yeah.
And I think I made the comment there one night how poor that we were. And she says, "What makes you think we were poor?" I said, "Well, Mom, every time I'd ask for anything, you said we couldn't afford it." And she says, "Well, don't you think maybe I did that to shut you up?" Maybe, but reading the stories,
I have a recollection that seems like it was when we were in Joe City of asking Mother if we were poor. I don't remember specifically what she said, but I'm quite sure it was not, yes, we are.
Yeah.
Well,
She made all her clothes.
Well, if we weren't poor, Mom worked awful hard to scrape
She
up
did.
a few spare dollars by getting that skirt
Oh,
pleating
yeah.
machines when we first lived
Pleated
in
squad
farming.
dresses.
Pleated those squad dresses, and that was hard work. It was a machine that you long, a tall, sort of a cylindrical cord contraption with these metal slats that went up and down in it.
Weighed 100 pounds, right?
Yeah, and she'd stuff the pleats of the squash dress in between those pleats after having starched the dress, and then to dry it, she'd get me or Kevin or Norman or somebody who could handle it. And I don't know why I was able to, because I was kind of little at the time, but to set it up on top of the stove and turn the burner on really low below it to let it dry out.
Mm-hmm.
And she would pleat those skirts for white cleaners.
Oh,
on
she
Wall
made
Street,
Yeah.
and get paid 75 cents a skirt for doing that.
Oh my goodness.
Is that all?
Yeah.
She worked awful hard.
Retail customers, she charged $1.50, but to the cleaners, she charged 75 cents. And that was the biggest part of the business. And if we weren't poor, she worked awful hard for 75 cents. Yeah.
That was another, I didn't bring that part up. Yeah, some of those things I thought made us poor.
At the time, I didn't think we were poor, and I just thought Mom worked a lot. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember ever feeling poor or underprivileged.
Good.
Well, you know, they
We
sent
lived in
us
a
all to
two-bedroom house with
college.
4 kids.
And I think for Mom and Dad, considering the income they had 3 of us in college, Doreen and me, and you were on your mission. Couldn't have been you, you weren't in college yet.
No.
So Doreen and I were both in college, Norman was on his mission, and they supported us through all that, on whatever their income was together, I don't know. But it was the sacrifice for me, you know it was, it had to be.
When you talk about, we were in school, I can remember a few times at BYU when the next semester was coming up and didn't know where the tuition was coming from.
Yeah.
But it always did.
Always did.
That's my testimony that I did primarily.
And we all graduated from college. I think Doreen did eventually, didn't she?
I don't think so.
Don't you think? I thought she went back.
I don't think she got a
Maybe not, but
you know? Doreen got a degree. Did she ever get a degree?
she quit school to get married.
I don't think she got a degree. She got married before she graduated.
Did she?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
She
yeah.
only went to a full year of college, one year of
Yeah,
college.
I remember. I
Yeah,
used
1
to
or 2
stay,
years of college.
stay with her once in a while when I came down from Salt Lake. So
So
Yes.
4 of the 5 are college graduates.
we got
And
a
I would-
PhD.
And I would have to say that maybe one of the descriptions then of your parents would be hard workers.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you bet.
Let's go back.
Speaking of education, and Joe said he brings another story to mind that probably you haven't heard. I remember still one time when I must have been about 8 years old in Joe City, talking to Mother and asking her what's the highest college degree there is, and she said a PhD, and I said I'm going to get that.
Really?
And,
You said that in Joe City?
Yeah, I remember it.
Pretty
And,
young.
it was never mentioned again, and I always figured that Mother didn't really feel like I'd made a definite commitment or anything. But after I graduated with my PhD, I asked Mother if she remembered that, and she had.
So how should you remember it all that time?
That's awesome.
They just assumed we'd all go to school. They, didn't
Which is
say.
great. So that's.
Yeah.
Let's go back for a minute, David. Kind of talk a little bit about your growing up years, because you were then maybe a little more, I don't know if stable's the word.
I thought you could do stable.
Let's talk a little bit about your.
image of stability for this family.
What are your memories of that?
My first memories are in the farmhouse, Grandpa Olson's farmhouse in Bountiful, Colorado.
Really?
And we all lived there. Seemed like a plenty large house to me, however, because it was the only house I'd ever known. But I do recall that, let's see, there was 1 bedroom downstairs, there was a parlor, there was a dining room and a kitchen, and the dining room kind of doubled as where everybody hung out all the time.
Yeah, everything.
We never went in the parlor,
No.
except for very special things.
It had a horsehair sofa. If you've ever sat on a horsehair sofa,
You didn't want to linger.
yeah, it was not comfy.
And there were the bedrooms in the attic, and there was 1 finished bedroom in the attic, and the other bedrooms were unfinished. There were bare rafters, and there were bare floor joists. And to go from bed to bed, you had to walk on the gangplank boards laying across the floor joists.
Now that was only in the one room.
Oh,
Over the dining room. The other room had a finished floor.
Yeah, one room.
And then the bedroom we all slept in, it had a finished floor.
Oh, it did? Okay.
So both the front ones did.
Oh,
But we had Doreen and I in one bed in that room. Mom and Dad right this close on the next side. The end of their bed was David in his crib.
I
You
remember
slept
that.
down with Grandpa.
I slept with Grandpa.
And there was a single bed in that room where Norman slept.
Yeah, so
I wonder sometimes how we ever did it. How Mom ever did it. Why didn't she go crazy right then and there?
yeah. So my memories, I thought life was great, but thinking back, it was crowded.
It was crowded.
And we seemed to get along. And I remember that stairway going up was pretty steep.
Yeah,
And
but
there's a bare light bulb that hung in that stairwell and a long string that went up to it. You pulled on that string to turn it on.
yeah, that's right.
And until you turned that string on, I was sure there was some boogeyman in there.
It was dark.
You had to turn the
It was
light
really
on before
dark.
you dared to go up the stairs.
Yeah.
And that big dining room den kind of area room had a big coal oil fired stove.
Big stove, really big.
And it would heat up, and it was really a delight to be near in the winter.
Yes.
Where did we all sit?
I don't know.
I've been thinking about that lately. Where did we sit?
It seemed like there was some kind of sofa thing on the wall.
Yeah, it was a little divan.
There
they
was.
called
There
it.
I remember that.
For Grandma.
Telephone was on the wall right next to it. Seems
Oh
like.
yeah, the telephone that you would crank like this, and it was hanging on the wall, and you'd have the handset, and you talk into the mouthpiece, and the operator would ask you what number you wanted to call, and you had to first listen to make sure nobody's already talking, and if somebody was talking, you had to be polite and wait 5 or 6 minutes and go back to see.
So shared lines, right?
Yeah. When your phone rang, it had a certain number of rings. So otherwise, you're supposed to leave it alone.
Yeah, and everybody's always certain that when your code rang, you would answer, but you would listen for other clicks to see who else was listening to.
If anybody else was on there. That's true.
Those are great stories.
And the house did not have anything when we first got there, and I remember Dad building the bathroom in Norman, probably. He built the bathroom.
Didn't have indoor plumbing.
So that we had
no
plumbing.
indoor bathroom, we had outdoor outhouses.
After that point, we went to the
It
outhouse.
was the greenhouse, it was called.
The greenhouse?
Yeah.
They walled off the end of what had been the kitchen, converted and made that the bathroom. Cut a
David,
door through the wall into the dining
You
room.
and Dad did that, didn't you? Two of you.
And dug a big old hole in the backyard for the cesspool.
And I remember that cesspool because I was afraid, scared to death I was going to fall in. I had this nightmare or something, but I didn't walk way around it.
I think we all kind of did that.
So 8 people in that house with 1 bathroom.
Yeah, teeny bathroom.
Not 8, there were.
Well,
So-
7 of us, yeah. There were 8.
And Clifford was there. He'd come down for dinner and stuff. And Clifford's a big guy.
And Clifford is who?
Our mother's brother.
Okay.
Older, younger?
Older.
Older brother.
Older brother. Okay. And then when did the folks move to Farmington? Were you all moved out by then, or?
The year I was a senior in high school.
1952.
Trauma.
I was already
really
BYU.
trauma.
I'd been there a couple of years.
Yeah, you
Okay. Yeah, that would not have been a pleasant moving for your
It
senior year.
Doreen blossomed right off because Linnea had a tough time because and Doreen, I think, was telling me that they kind of picked on you as the newcomer.
Oh yeah, we had they had in
Well, it's
Farmington.
because you were the smartest. That's
Yeah,
why
that
they were
was
managed.
why they didn't like me, because I come in and taken away all the former honors. They had they selected 3 candidates for what they call the Good Citizen of the Year. And the 3 names were me and 2 other girls. And when they announced the winner, it was this other girl who'd always been first in the class. But then they redid it because they had found out that the ballot box had been stuffed. And after they recounted, then I had the.
You had won.
I was a good citizen, but it was hard, just like Farmington.
All right, we have to wind this down. So any last final thoughts of this is just the first part of your lives, obviously, but anything that you want to add on here or share?
Well, I was telling Norman on the phone the thing that I, as I've grown, I look back and I don't think I understood my parents. I don't really know what made them tick. Someday I'd like to learn that. I don't know, somehow
I don't know
I'd
if
like to
anybody
learn.
did. They were very reticent about how their feelings and what was going on in their heads. And it was really, I talked to my mom after I was married and had a few children, and I asked her about it. I was talking about
Grandpa and the farm and Dad and all that. And she says to me, "You don't know what you're talking about." And I thought, "Okay, I probably don't." And she set me straight. She won't talk about it.
When did you see that growing up? Did you notice it growing up, or did you see it once you were out of the house?
I was out of the house, and I used to just think back and try to, you're always trying to self-examine, and I'm trying to figure out, well, what was my parents like? Do I reflect their personality?
Well,
I'm afraid I do. And Susan's convinced I do because she says you Smith guys are all alike. Smith boys are all alike.
Hard to share feelings, hard to share your feelings, kind of idea?
Hard to and too quiet in her mind. We're too quiet.
That's the Scandinavian way. You don't talk about feelings and show feelings in Sweden and Norway. They're very reticent and reluctant to talk. So I think that was part of it.
And the lack of openness.
Yeah, we didn't show affection. Yeah.
Well, okay, and here's an example of how that shows up today. How often do we call each other on the phone?
Yeah, really.
Maybe once a year. On average, you could say once a year we'll speak to each other on the phone.
That's kind of bad.
Okay, and for how long have you three lived here in the Salt Lake, in the Utah Valley here, or in the land of Zion?
I told Linnea this
40 years.
First time in how many months?
Yeah.
So
he's not working anymore. You had time to call.
I know for a fact that often, and it was commented to me by you guys, that when I would come up to Utah, would be the only time of the year that you guys ever got together.
That's right.
Sometimes you'd organize it. You'd call me and say, let's get together in the park.
Downtown, let's and not that I'm a social butterfly, but
yeah, really.
It just kind of shows that we're just kind of quiet, and we figure everybody's going to be all right unless somebody says otherwise.
I think Mom and Dad were successful parents. We all have a little bit of problem if we're in there, maybe, but they were good parents, and you could call them loving, even though not very demonstrative. I think all of us knew that they loved us, didn't we?
I felt comfortable and wanted, yeah.
So you're really proud of my heritage. And
I didn't feel that Dad was much involved in my life. I remember thinking about that in high school.
He had pretty much retreated from life by the time you guys
had
grown.
Yeah, something had happened, and I feel like he had began to. I don't know. He was very withdrawn during my high school years, at any rate.
I'll tell you, but just real quick, when I was 20, when I had gone to ROTC camp, that was preparatory for the ROTC for the commission, and I had some struggles to get going with that thing. It was tough. It was tough. I wasn't a baby or anything. I was married, and I remember calling Mom up, and I thought the situation would come if I hadn't handled it well, and I was talking to her and I said, Mom, I'm afraid I'm just like Dad. And she didn't say a word.
Yeah.
No.
She's very loyal. She never criticized Dad to us, that I can remember.
Oh, I remember she did.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
See that?
She was a little upset that he had not followed through on different projects. For example, all the TV repair pieces and equipment that he had for this correspondence course that he had stuck under the bed. She'd refer to that occasionally as under there collecting dust forever.
Yeah.
That she felt like he should have had more ambition.
Well, apparently Aunt Mert said, Doreen, I think it was, Doreen, that she thought personally that Dad had been babied in his role as the youngest child of the 44. Everybody babied him. She said he never had to work for anything. He'd say he wanted it, somebody'd get it for him. And she says, I really think that's one reason why he isn't more outgoing. So I don't know. You guess.
Those are very insightful. As coming from a in-law, it's very interesting to hear those feelings about your parents. Is there anything then you would say to your posterity? Obviously, this is being made for your posterity. About the Smith family genetics, anything that you would say do differently, do the same?
Well, this is kind of a genetic comment, and it's a pretty good family story that I talked to a doctor once about a tendon I've got in my hand that's attached, and he says, "Well, do you have Viking ancestors?" I said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm half Danish and quarter Swedish." So the Swedish side comes from our grandmother Smith, who was born Larson, Larson.
Right.
She was the daughter of Måns Larsson, who was an old pioneer. And of course, the Olsen side is Olsen. And the story was that I've heard, Norman was working on genealogy during his high school years, and he says, "Mom, how do you spell Olsen? Is it O-N or E-N?" And Mom says in a voice that was much louder than necessary, "It's Ian, I ain't no damn Swede."
I've heard that story too.
I've never heard that before. Oh boy. That's great.
Well, maybe a reflection I've had that would be significant. I've grown up, of course, with this polygamous family. I thought that was the normal thing. I just thought it was great. Everybody got along great. We'd go to family reunions, and everybody was one family. And then over the years, I've picked up that in the church generally, polygamy was mostly a failure.
Yeah.
And there are some real horror stories coming out of it. And, seems to have been considered almost more of a curse. I
don't know. My sociology teacher at BYU said if you try to decide whether or not it was a success or a failure, how many of you in this classroom, and it was a big classroom full, are descended from polygamous families? And about 3/4 of the room had come from polygamy.
Well,
so that's something.
There's another quick story. My dad's funeral, the man who spoke, he was a patriarch or something, but he was a Smith from another of the wives. But we were talking about the family, and he said we were about 25,000 strong at the time of all the descendants of Jesse N Smith. And he said that 70% of the males in the family, or 80, or some great percentage, had filled missions. So I would say that was a help to the church.
Yeah, quite a legacy. Yeah. You think about that.
Yeah.
Lots of cousins.
That's great. So your parents then were in Farmington until now. Your mom passed away first.
They came to Utah.
Yeah. Okay.
After David, you were living in the house in Wall. You'd come in from Tuolina, right?
Yes.
And so we convinced them they ought to come up where we could be closer to him. And they did eventually do that. And they lived in Orem. We bought a little house, and they bought a little house. And they were both
close
there.
to you, Linnea.
It was close to me, and I would come in every day and see if Mom had taken her pills, all of that kind of stuff. And when they were living there in that little house, my mom died.
And that would have been what year?
Gosh, I don't know.
Well, she was going to be 70 that year, so it would be 60.
69, yeah, and it was January, I remember.
69?
80.
80.
The year mother would have turned 70.
I would have been 70, yeah.
So then Dad lived in that house until he couldn't get along alone anymore.
79.
And so David took him down to Las Cruces to live with him. And so we're down with David's family until he died.
And that was a great act of love. That's when I came into the family and knew that you had Grandpa for a long time. Had your dad?
Yeah, he lived with our family for about 10 years. And there were, we saw his increasing senility, and there's a time the high priest, for his birthday in our ward, we were living in El Paso actually at the time for about a year. And the high priest in that El Paso ward decided they'd want to commemorate Dad's birthday, and so they all came to the house for a little open house. And so we were sitting around and eating cookies and drinking punch, and people were telling stories, and Dad says, "That reminds me of the story about Jay Gould and Kimball."
Oh, yeah,
So
you did know a few of those.
So he tells the story about Jay Gould and Kimball and him not getting excommunicated because he repents too damn fast. And everybody laughed.
Yeah.
So we're sitting there a little bit, and then Dad says, "That reminds me of the story about Jay Gould and Kimball." He repeated that story 4 times, and the laughter got fainter and fainter each time, and people kind of began walking away. But that was kind of an indication of things going south for Dad at the time. But and he was in a wheelchair, and to get around from place to place, he could still walk, but it was just so slow and laborious for him. We got a wheelchair just so we could get places. We made quite a sight to put him on the wheelchair. We lived just about a couple blocks from the church, so we put Grandpa on the wheelchair. The youngest Michael in his lap, Jacob standing on the steps in between his feet, and we push him down the street, and all the rest of the kids in the line. It's quite a parade, and people arriving by as we went to church.
You had 8 kids then? You had them all?
At that time we had 7.
7 kids. I wanted to go.
And occasionally he would ask Diane, my wife, "Who are all these kids around here? Are they ours?" And he thought I was his brother Akins quite often.
Yeah.
And he would say to me, "Where's Mom?" I wasn't ever sure exactly if he meant his mother or my mother.
Yeah.
But the answer was the same. "She's in Snowflake." "Well, what's she doing there?" "She's waiting for you." That's where both Grandma and my mother are buried, which was the true answer.
Right. And then that's where he was buried as well.
Yeah.
So.
And his death was rather poignant. He'd been in this pretty obvious last stages of his life, and not being in a comfortable situation, and not knowing where he was, and being lonely, for someone of his own age and things. And he'd gotten sick. He had a real bad cold. And I went in to his bedside and said, "Dad, I have a feeling you've been hanging on to life to help me out, and I appreciate it. And I think I needed it. But now I think I'm okay, so if you want to go ahead, it's all right." The next day he took a turn for the worse. I called the doctor, and the doctor wanted to bring him to our office. So I put him in the car. We started down the street and walked from the house. He took a big breath of air and breathed it out, and that was his last. And I said, "Goodbye, Dad." And so it's really it's a dear moment for me. So.
Well, that was a labor of love, and I know that your siblings appreciated your care for him as well.
But I do think he was hanging on still to help me out. I really do. And he gave me some kind of moral support, and I appreciate it.
David looks very much like Dad.
Oh,
And Akins and George. All his brothers, they all.
Well, an amazing family, and not a kind of short time to be able to talk about it, but grateful that you guys gathered to do this, and your posterity is going to love this.
Well, appreciate you putting it together.
Yes.
It's the kind of thing we've talked about doing for several years.
We said we need to do this.